Uh, Hi, Jeff. Great to see you.
Good day, sir. Great to see you as always. We're back on our rhythm every other
Yeah,
week
every
now.
other week. Yeah, it's
Um,
nice, and this one's a juicy one.
oh yes, it's quite a canyon of of multiple meanings and um, uh, the past and the future and um, the evolution, physical evolution and human development and initiation processes. And I never realized this what Revelations was
No,
until reading this time. Like
yeah,
I'm sure I don't know what I was thinking the first time I read through Christianity's Mystical Fact, but the layers upon layers upon layers that this chapter, the Apocalypse uh, of Saint John, um, is a well. In fact, Steiner devotes much time to it um, shortly after the writing of this book.
mm,
In 1908, there's a
that's
series
right.
of
Yeah,
lectures, and then in 1924, there's a the just 3 January, February, March, 4 months before his death, he gave lectures to the priests about Revelations. Like I
yeah,
don't even know how many lectures there are there. I was
yeah. It's like
I
18
referred
or
to them.
so. It's
Yeah,
it's a huge. Yeah,
and it's the mature Steiner toward the end of his life, and the layers upon layers of meaning in Revelations that have to do with the initiatory process and the initiatory process of John, then the initiatory process of Christianity as it exists now in the world. And we'll try to cover as much as we can, but it is so much that it would take a whole series for us to even get to the multiplicity of meanings and the import. It's like it's a really solemn read
mm,
this time through, and every time I go through again this lecture, I mean, yeah, it's a lecture. This lecture, I'm no, it's this chapter. It's a written chapter. It was came from lectures that then was written down.
correct.
You
Yeah,
understand that this is just the introduction to Steiner's Christology. It's that, and this chapter could be the introduction to that Christology, let alone the whole book. So everything that's packed in this chapter is absolutely crucial. And I don't even know that I have the wherewithal to give it anything of any enhanced meaning but let's do it. Let's try it because it's
but
going to be
I
a
think
process.
you're already sort of like it's like giving like a hugely important introduction, as I see it as well. Talking about the huge import of it and so like the massiveness of the task, and of course we're only going to skim the surface, which, to be fair, is really what he does in this chapter of the book. I'm not sure the extent to which what background reading you've been doing, but it sounds like you've been doing the same as me. You've been looking at 104, 104A, and the lectures to the priests as well. And I've got this. Anybody who knows Emil Bock, I've been looking at that as well. So I've really gone all in the last couple of weeks, and it's also dawning on me how, in a way, in the group with Matt and Ashton, etc., we're going to be looking at esoteric science or occult science as of February. I think it's the first week of February. We're going to be starting that, and that is like part of that is like to create this cosmology. So because that's what one of the things that you find in occult science, you could you could use the apocalypse or revelation to do exactly the same thing. That's how massive this is. You begin to wake up to how multi-layered it is, and how it touches so many fundamental key areas of Christology, as you were saying, and what Steiner describes as Christ's role in the full evolution of humanity, right from the beginning of time to the end of time. And it really is breathtaking, and you already get a flavor for it just reading this chapter. But yeah, it's just a start.
One thing it does do for me, that is crystal clear, startlingly so, I would say, is make you realize that there is um, there is there's a lawfulness to the way in which the future can be understood.
Mm.
That there is a lawfulness within the, the very existence of reality that is also part of our psycho spiritual organization
Mm.
that um, will in the and particularly in this day and age we talk about the Anthropocene. That we are um, um, the major player on Earth, say, right? Now that's in dispute, of course,
Hmm.
as we've talked with our metamodern friends, whether or not we've always been present, or whether we're present in the farthest reaches, or empty space is truly empty space. And those are questions that are cosmological, as you say. But there's no doubt that we are part of and a powerful involvement in the way the Earth is evolving. And and this chapter really brought home to me the way the reality that we are, um that there's that there the way we're structured, there's something lawful about the way the future will play out
Yeah.
psychospiritually, that the way in which we create our societies, the way in which we interact with each other, and the right way we interact with nature, and the degree to which we locate ourselves as part of this unity, this universal reality, the degree to which we experience it, not just intellectually locate it,
Yeah.
but become it.
Um, for our listeners, watchers, viewers, I'm going to try. Let's like park the conversation at the beginning. So, last chapter, we we looked at Lazarus, the myth of Lazarus. We might not have made it so like sufficiently clear, but Lazarus is it's like initiated. He is the disciple that Christ loved, and that is John, who wrote the Gospel of St. John, and also who wrote the Apocalypse. And because he was initiated, like all initiates, what one way of describing what happens to him is in full consciousness. He is alive in the astral world, and one of the fundamental qualities about the astral world is it's the opposite of our time. And so, like in lots of other lectures, Steiner so like talks about how yep, here on Earth, it's like a direction. So like has this. It's like it depends where you're from, but like there's an arrow to time, and it goes from the past to the future. And it's completely the opposite in the astral. So that when you are in the astral world, what you're seeing is the impulses that will become manifest. It's like in the physical plane at some stage in the future, and it's there'll be certain people that can't accept that. Although, so like one of the things that is interesting is that science can actually see no reason why time shouldn't be able to flow in both directions. This is one of these like quirky things that's like it shouldn't make any difference whether it runs backwards or forwards. And someone like Steiner will say, well, yeah, absolutely. So like once you get to the other side, if you're an initiate or when we die, you live in this other dimension where it's like what the cause effect relationship becomes effect cause relationship, which is also something that we met in the philosophy of freedoms, like in the second part of the chapter there. But this reversal of time and this idea that really, and it's an essential part, or it's potentially an essential part of the human condition to be able to see the future. This is one of these things that has to be a starting point that you're ready to accept when you read something like the Apocalypse. And there's another interesting parallel between actually the construction of the Old Testament and the New Testament, because the Old Testament also it has its history, it has its poetical lyricals like bits in the middle, and then it has its prophetic part, which is the prophets all talking about the Messiah that should come. And one can say that essentially that the New Testament is also repeating this same structure. In the Gospels, as we've looked at, we've got mystical facts, or it's like the experiences that all initiates would have actually being manifested, so like in the real world. But what we're reading in the Gospels are actually initiatory experiences that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John have had, and they're reporting to us. But because they are because of their level of initiation, we should not be surprised that on many points there's a convergence of facts with what actually happens on the physical plane. But so you've got that historical part going there. It's like similar to the beginning of the Old Testament. Then you've got Paul in the middle with his select descriptions of what it's like. He never saw Jesus. He only experienced Christ in the supersensible. And then in John, we've got John also, not only did he experience Jesus as like in the flesh and blood, as it were, but he also experienced Christ in the supersensible. And this is what we're seeing. So this revelation happening. And we could just dwell one more moment on the fact that it's like the word apocalypse or revelation does mean an uncovering of something. It's the future that's being revealed to John in this story. Do you want to come in on anything there?
I just want to add that that in relationship to that last part, that John also experienced the initiation process that the Christ experienced before and continuing. I'm guessing ongoingly as the Christ experienced the initiation, so to speak, or the resurrection, the death and the resurrection, and the ascent. That this was a real time experience for John during and after, as opposed to a Pauline revelation, or the disciples witnessing just the after in this plane. That that John had the absolutely God, I can only imagine it as a devastatingly powerful experience of living through the resurrective process. This is my take on it. So this is an experience then that means that John experiences the very foundations of material existence, and the origination of matter and that sort of thing. Like that. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about experiencing the earth as a unity within the cosmos, as an experience that then has a lawful trajectory to it. And I'll just stop there because I'm far out of my depth. But it's something one can ponder on for a lifetime.
Yeah. It is. It has to be one of those open questions. I mean, this particular revelation, my understanding of it is that he received it like on Patmos, so like right at the end of his life. But as you correctly say, he was the first one that was initiated by Christ to experience Christ in the supersensible, like through Lazarus, also recognized that Christ lived in Jesus, as it were. But how that relationship, it's like continued when Christ died on the cross. It's like we can only begin to imagine what might have happened in the time between the resurrection and it's like on Patmos. I think it's I've got somewhere like the 65 AD. So like for some reasons like stuck in my head. But yeah, I could be completely wrong on that.
Yeah, there are some that say 65, some that say 95.
Yeah.
Um, the we touched upon it occurs to me we touched upon this last time that that what the difference between John's um, conveyance overall, but specifically in Revelations,
Mm,
is that he's describing the things that we will have to experience in order to 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 have the religio, to have the
yeah.
to re-yoking to existence, because we are separate. We are separate from the rest of existence. We're separate from each other. We're separate from nature. We are part of a fallen reality,
Yeah.
right? And we can continue on in our simulative processes, or we can um, embrace that reality and take the take the initiation process up. The initiative is not enough to say to take real freedom up in a way that is fully serious as relates to the way in which what we will have to face is going to be extraordinarily difficult, but absolutely necessary in a sense. There's a necessity about it.
Yeah. Should we start to tread that path? Because, like you were hinting at, oh, no, you were explicit about it actually. You're saying it's like you've got the history of humanity and the earth. It's like it's already there in the beginning of Revelation when we're introduced to the bull, the lion, and the eagle and man. Should we talk around that a little bit before we sort of then go on to the riders and the seals and what they recognise? Because there is this there's this complete coherence and congruence with spiritual science here. So um, I'm not planning on this being a long spiel, so like feel free to like interrupt me if so like something springs to mind. But I'll make a go at starting. So anybody who's like vaguely familiar with Christianity will know that Luke is for seemingly obscure reasons, and we'll get into this. It's like connected with the bull. John is connected with the eagle, and Mark is connected with the lion, and then Matthew is connected with the human being. And these are the four animals that we meet. It's like at the beginning of Revelation here, and one of the things Steiner is at pains to stress here, and looking at Egyptian art is one way of also absorbing like this same idea that from these initiation centers back in the ancient world, it was obvious to them that it's like there are three like essential animals. It's like the bull, the lion, and the eagle, which are the like formative forces, the it's like aspects of the Plato's world soul in a certain way that are all like part of creating the human being. And so these are like the archetypes of the human being. And when we look at the animal kingdom from an anthroposophical perspective, it's like what is happening is that these animal forces, they are materializing themselves, getting stuck somewhat early in the, what should we call it, in the materialization process. And it's actually the human beings, it's like that hold themselves back to retain the flexibility and the ability to, it's like to receive the last gifts of the gods. And again, it's like the connection with the story of Epimetheus and Prometheus and the giving out of the gift it is quite amazing. Sorry, I'm like jumping around here. But so right there at the beginning, we've got this profound connection with some things that Stein has talked about on multiple occasions that we can map to strange, apparently strange stories in Greek mythology. It's also the same strangeness, but of an identical nature in Egyptian mythology. And that already there, you're beginning to sense that, oh yeah, why this introduction of animals at the beginning of Revelation, it becomes so obvious because that is where it started. He's starting at the beginning, and why wouldn't you start at the beginning to lay out the ground before you then go to start talking about the future, what's to come?
Yes, all very mysterious, of course. Um, there's a couple things. One is in doing a little bit of research, you realize that this the Garden of Eden is an well, it speaks of an initiatory process of a previous time. In other words, people were experiencing the formative realities of the plant world as emblematic, right? And now we're moving into this formative realities of the astral world, as you led with. So there's that. The other thing is going back to the fallen aspect, is that as human beings we are neotnous, and I don't just mean as children, right? Born in a neonatonous neo how would you say it? Neotenous relationship with our parents, but that as the human condition with nature, with the is one of neoteny. It's one that takes a long time over human history to actually evolve toward a kind of spiritual autonomy that it would take to that is given to the animal world, that is given to the plant world, that was given to us at a certain point, but is no longer a given.
Yeah.
And that's part of the given. That right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and which we've also met in different contexts that have nothing to do with biblical stuff as well, like in the whole pursuit of knowledge question there. Just unpack that word neoteny. It's not one that I'm familiar with. I've seen it in context a few times, but it's not something I've unpacked. Do you want to like give that a go?
Essentially, to give it the sort of coarse grained definition, it's that we are creatures that are dependent um, on um, the parental, symbolically and literally.
Mm-hmm.
In the case that I mean it now, on the parental connection, that we are born helpless, and it takes 18 years for us to live on our own, and in the coddling of the American mind, it's taking 30 years now.
Yeah.
So, and even then, it is this neoteny is prolonged, rather than we don't have the rituals to take up our spiritual autonomy. We don't have the educational systems. That everything that we are doing is working against the um, the heritage of that dependency, and extending it out further, as opposed to seeing that as a gift that will allow for a spiritual freedom.
Yeah.
And so the spiritual autonomy comes in a completely new way for me now, as relates to the necessity of it. It seems like a contradiction in terms,
Yeah.
but there's an iron necessity about freedom.
That's right. So that when we mentioned before about animals, because they descended earlier, but the human beings are like held back. So like to be able to receive so like these final gifts of the gods, that actually that caused a ossification, if you like, of the ability to adapt, which is why like it's like a foal pops out of a mare, and it's like within 1 or 2 days it's walking around. It doesn't. It's like it's innate. It can do almost everything. It's like after it's like a handful of days or a handful of weeks on planet Earth. Whereas, as you're saying, it's like a human being is actually it's never a fully finished product in itself, and even at 18, we're not so like we're only just approaching like physical maturity, and that let alone soul and spirit maturity. That's something that's like way into the future for an 18-year-old. And I think it's good to connect that to like this. It's it's like a certain aspect of having a. We're not clean slates as and from a certain perspective, but from another perspective, that's exactly what we are, because we don't have this like really rigid pre-programming that we see in the animal kingdom, from which it the only way it can escape from that is by like being together with human beings.
Yes, and through species adaptation to a
Yeah,
changing environment that human beings are increasingly affecting,
yeah,
right? Again, the responsibility associated with there's no amount of climatology and climate activism that's going to uh, on that's going to harmonize with the true nature of things unless we are deepening our embodiment inside of nature as self-conscious beings,
yeah,
not losing our consciousness, not claiming embodiment, that, but that means the terrible descent in a certain way, the involution into matter, which
yeah.
is what John's picture
This is this
describes.
grand
This
picture.
initiatory process describes the process that we have to go through.
Yeah.
Uh, what a gift! What an amazing gift, and it hasn't even been tried yet.
There's one, sticking with the animals. There's one final point that I want to make that I think might be interesting for people out there, because it was the first time I ever heard it, and um, yeah, so I share it. So in one of the like bits of reading around this, I heard Steiner mentions that actually this thing about it's like these archetypal animal beings being it's like in on the astral plane, in the spiritual world, in the dimension, that he says that actually this is when how can I put this, this is part of the explanation for why in Buddhism one of the thoughts that has um, been created about reincarnation is that people turn back into animals. And he says that it's like this quite clearly isn't the case. It's like here on Earth, but he does say that it's like after death, some people, if the human being hasn't cultivated it's like human qualities, then they will in the afterlife, they can take on the appearance of one of these or modifications of one of these three animals. And I thought that was really interesting, because it's a way of saying that is this belief in Buddhism, or it's like in reincarnation within Buddhism, that you can select somehow go back to an animal form. He's giving a way in which is fully coherent with how he's presenting what's going on in the in Revelation here, but also pointing out how easy it is to misinterpret what could well be a truth. It's like in Buddhism, but people have like taken it to mean it's like the opposite of what it means. It's like saying it's like you can, if you've been a bad boy, you can come back here as an ant, so that somebody can stamp on you, so you can know what it's like to be stamped on as an ant. It's not that. So hearing that gem and being able to connect it uh, with these archetypal forces that are like at the heart of like the human being, that was interesting and new for me.
Yeah, generally speaking, this the whole notion of the archetype uh, comes storming back in here for me, and we're
Hmm.
really talking about beings, right? Because when you say that when one says that the animal world is not as individually adaptable, but the species is, that you're
Yeah,
talking about a being that is the species, that is an individuated being, something like that. And that's a hard one for the modern mind. It's hard for me, frankly,
hmm.
but I keep getting closer to it. I keep feeling the intimacy of that forces our beings, they're iterated through concepts and these sorts of things. Um, um, the other thing I wanted to say is that we have an indication of this what you're talking about, that we don't reincarnate as cats, you know, the next time around, but that um, through the initiation process, you do go through animal totem experiences. Like one does go through that, and it can be quite wickedly terrible because of the passions that are associated with the
Mm.
fierceness of that particular, say, specialty. I guess is one way to put it. This in the one-sidedness, in the locked-in quality of what it would be to be animalic. Uh, um, so what I was referring to actually as the hints or indications are, if you look at indigenous cultures, particularly Native American cultures, or what I'm more familiar with. I'm not saying
Mhm.
I'm an expert, but the way in which animals are inhabited as part of the an initiation process of maturity, just maturity, and the empathy that is gained, the ability to imagine oneself into the world of the animalic in order to have a sacred relationship, but also understand it well enough to overcome it so that it can serve the needs of that community. That's a very generalized statement, but I think it's also an indication of what we're talking about.
Okay.
Consiliently, there's a
Yeah.
deep continuity here. And this is the other thing I'd want to say about this work, this Revelations, is that it is deeply continuous throughout, from an epistemological standpoint all the way down to physical evolution of the earth. Like it's like this is way over my head.
Yeah. And we already flagged. I think we flagged that last week, and we like said it here. We realise we're skimming the surface, but I do think it's also interesting to add. I thank you for bringing in the North American Indians there. So it's valuable because also I think it can be frightening, especially for a Western like scientific mind to like be associated with the animals. But one way, if my understanding is correct, is what Steiner is saying is that, yep, the bull forces are the will that's living in us. And the lion forces are the heart, the feeling forces. And the eagle is the thinking forces. Now, if it frightens you to connect those forces with like animals, then it's understandable. But if you like, it's like it's your problem. What he's saying here is in initiatory language, and especially in John, that is the truth. We think thanks to eagle forces. It's I mean, I might be like exaggerating, simplifying a lot there. No, not I might. I am simplifying vastly, but these are essential forces, and as soon as you come into contact with anthroposophy, I think for many years, or perhaps even decades, you're bamboozled by this fixation on willing, thinking, and feeling. But over time, you begin to realize that that's all I am. I am a willing, feeling, thinking being. That describes me. That describes me in my totality. And the more I sort of like enter into, so like, what is my essential nature? That's it. That is it. It's like the fact that I'm talking now here is like it's a mixture of those three forces. And anything anybody ever does in life is a mixture of those forces. So connecting those like so poignantly and so definitively with these animals in Revelation. Again, it's like as this depth of feeling it that's like here we're like in the ground of thinking in philosophy of freedom, we sort of like you begin to recognize where it is. Here in the apocalypse, it's like we're approaching that same sort of ground, the ontology instead of the epistemology. It's like the ground of being of us. This is this is what he's introducing us to, John, in the beginning of the apocalypse. And
But also including the epistemology. So
yeah,
including that epistemology is an ontology. It's a deed. It's an act. It's a participation in the creation at the level of thinking, and thinking has feeling and willing in it as well. We
Yeah.
want to remember that. I am. I also, though the modern mind might um, have some hesitation as relates to the animalic, say,
Hmm.
um, it also collapses the human experience into the animal. So it doesn't properly in natural scientific narrative doesn't properly differentiate what a human being is, unique to but incorporative of the other kingdoms of nature,
Mm.
including the mineralic, the plant, and the animal, as generative forces that are alive within us, and that we're until we can become spiritually autonomous in incorporating them and involuting into them in our consciousness, then we'll remain outside with
Mm.
these models and theories and simulations and such.
Yeah. So what happens next? So we've been given like a grounding in it's like the root of our being and the root of human being, and then there's given a book. That's like a book appears, doesn't it? Uh, which initially can't be read. If I mix up like the order of things here, so like please help me. So this book is this book with seven seals, and as I said, so like they're sealed, and the first at first he's not able to unseal this book. Um, it feels like I'm missing a point because we've got the riders who come in. No, but there must be the lamb must come before the lamb comes before the riders, doesn't it?
I'm not sure. Maybe as we talk about the seven seals, the
Okay,
it'll
let's do that. Yeah. So if we talk about these like the well-known riders, so like the white, the red, and the black, and the pale riders. One of the things that Steiner talks about, he describes it differently in this book here, but we will converge there. I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle, but he's directly linking them to like the Indian epoch, the Persian epoch, or the cultural period, cultural epoch, the Egyptian, and then the Greco-Roman period, as to how these are reflections of how these animals that we've been referring to, how they have like by being incarnated, these impulses, these archetypes, by being like living in materia, it's like how it's worked upon. It's like human evolution. Um, so we have it's like the white rider who is it's like a representation of the first epoch after the Great Atlantean, and this is one of the things. So we're still talking historical, and we're going to move into the future soonish. But uh, how as humanity, it's like as represented by the white rider, how its relationship to the divine world changes as it begins to like lose its connection. It's still got a very strong connection with the in the Indian epoch, and this is the white rider for him, and then gradually we see this ever greater distancing of ourselves from the spiritual world, um, and then we've got and the increasing this increasing distance from the divine world, leading to like an increased corruption of like the nature of the human being, that this relationship. And Then we get this like really important event, which is that the lamb. So the fifth seal cannot be broken, or he might have already been present before. Well, he definitely was present before, but he might make himself present like immediately. It's like in the fifth there, as an indication. Um, oh no no no. So that's good. Yeah. So as an indication that this lamb that's like this new animal that comes onto the scene, that this is the representative of Christ. That's like this new animal, and it's the animal that's going to save it's like save creation, or a certain part. So it's like 12 times 12,000 um, in into the future. But so again, we see this mapping over, or this coherence between the story that we find in esoteric science and the use of animals and the lamb and the link to Christ, like in the apocalypse. There, it's telling the same story. Yeah, so, perhaps you can clear up any things that I was a little bit unclear about there, Jeff. I'm not sure.
Well, how about um, just to see if we can dial this in a little bit more of the four horsemen and what it is that is brought in relationship to the four animals, say,
Yeah.
the continuity of the four here, something to do with the first one being something to do with, or is it the first one something to do with peace, with the
Come
lion
to
and
break peace. I think
break,
that's the
yes,
red
to keep
one.
people
If I
from, yeah, that's right. What, so and that has to do with a non-complacency,
yeah,
that
sloth. Yeah,
there has to be friction, there has to be the push and pull of the sympathy and antipathy that
yeah,
is, the lion's, that being that is ravenously hungry and then perfectly at peace, that after, perfectly satiated and sleeps, just like those two polarities. But before that, it's what is the
I know
after
the
that is,
third one was justice, wasn't it?
third one was justice, yes, and the fourth was the the representative carrying out of that justice that Christianity, as the forefathers would have established it,
Yeah,
right, as a community that would be the sort of a historical moment that relates to the turning point at which then we move into the fifth, right. I don't remember what the first one was, and I hope to recall it, but it it makes so much sense when you get this progression. So we are in the fifth epoch, right? We are
yeah,
that the epoch of the consciousness soul, the um, the epoch of the I, of the one,
yeah.
um, out of the four, all of these, and then that again, as you say, speaks to what does the future hold, and then that has to do with the from an initiatory standpoint, it has to do with the spirit self,
Mhm.
the life spirit, the life spirit as next stages in human evolution, which is why it's predictable, why it's foreseeable, how what will occur in the psycho spiritual organization as it exists and has existed and will exist because of what we know now about where we are and who we are. And I think we're seeing this around us all the time, that this is the experience I had while I was reading this, is like my contemporaries are prophets in a certain sense. We're all seeing the future, right?
Mm.
In a sense, in a way that I'm not, it's not clear to me that any but a few in previous times have. There was a lot there, but um, it
Coming in on what you were
explores
saying
this.
about the seals there, because again, because we're because we're battling with this ourselves. So it's stressing that the four animals are the first four seals that are being, it's like, revealed. And he goes into some depth elsewhere about what is an occult or an initiatory understanding of what a seal is, and he makes reference to the fact that these were, it's like, all of our senses were initially, it's like sensitive areas of our being that then became, they made themselves receptive for an influence. Okay. And so again, so like somewhat taking an example of the eyes, this idea, which we'll also find in scientific literature, that's like, prior to the existence of eyes as light perceiving objects, they were initially experienced is, it's like, as areas that caused, it's like, pain, for, it's like these extra sensitive sites, a little bit like, it's like a wound or something, but that over time this sensitivity, it's like, converted itself into a sense. And he says that seals are to be understood in this way when you're looking at an initiatory literature. And the significance of this is, it's like, for this, that for the fifth seal that is broken and the lamb appears, this is a direct reference to the fact that by opening ourselves up to Christ, it's like this initial, this stress that even exoteric Christianity has on, like, how faith will save you. There is a lot of a deep fundamental truth to that, that this is the starting point of the process, an acceptance of something, so like, that's beyond you, so that then you can become, so like, receptive to it. Goethe talks about it's like light made, it's like, the organ of sight, our eyes, so that it could perceive itself. And Christ is like creating, for those that choose to believe, it's like this organ that becomes sensitive for being able to receive the Christ impulses. It looks like you've had an epiphany, or you wanted to
I
say
wouldn't.
something at least.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. I think an incremental lessening of the dimness, say, that would be the way to put it. But this really is bang on what you're saying, and this is something I was casting about while reading this, is, and thinking about it, and doing dovetail readings, and listening to other lectures and such, is that um, here, those sensory, that sensory world that was being worked on, say, in ancient India, the, which was a an etheric body, essentially, and
Yeah.
the etheric becoming a body,
Yeah.
right? Becoming not just the the continuity and simultaneity with all existence, but becoming a body that was perceiving the world.
Separate.
And this is really key, because the senses then would have been evolving out of a life process. So they would have been at once a life process and a sensory experience. That's what would have been occurring. And we know this now because of the seven life processes. So what ultimately I would suggest that Christ is opening up for us as sensory experience, perception, the mystery of perception, is the ensoulment of those life processes, so that breathing becomes a not it becomes
A soul
a,
spiritual
a,
process.
a soul spiritual event, an epistemological soul spiritual event. And of course that can't happen right away. We'd be blown apart by the full reality of existence through our breath, right? And our lungs would perceive all of existence, and we would just be subsumed by it, right? And so we have the 12 senses, and
Yeah.
it's our work to transform the 12 senses. And it really is the involution into the lower six, and the evolution of the higher six, 12 senses, right, that allow for this um, this uh, transformation, what John Vervaeke might call exaption of a sensory process into a process that is cognitive and not just over and against, right? And so it's I believe, if I'm not mistaken from my meditations over the last couple of weeks, is that the higher senses are already touching upon this,
Yeah.
in that we have a sense of the other, and that we have a sense of tone in the world, and that these are initiatory process. The trumpets are the tone, right? They're the music of the spheres, the devachan, or the devotion, as you say.
And also the distant future as well. So like beyond as well. So it goes even deeper than that. It's everything you said and so much more. This is what's so mind blowing about it.
Yeah, that's what the problem is
you're,
that
you're,
we're
you're
having.
scrabbling to find where you are, but you realize you've got to be in multiple places at the same time with the same image, and that's that's the challenge, isn't it? To begin to
It,
realize this is far far more profound than he already gives it a profound reading. It's like just in this chapter, but then when you discover other things that he said about it, you realize that this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true. All of these are valid readings of the same identical passages, and that really is difficult.
yes, and to support what I'm saying, and to add to what you're saying, the idea of ensoulment is incredibly structurally important, operationally important for what it is to be a human being, um, and a being in the universe, say, because it's our entry into what it is to be human. We're not even there yet, you know, and um, uh, the Christ has become fully human, you could say, that a God has become fully human, went ahead and led the way, right, and is an evolutionary personality that is existent, that we can come into relationship with mediating factors like
Yeah.
the beings that stand between that totality and us, that we need to incrementally move into. And um, so this well, I'll just leave that at there,
Mm.
because again, it's so elusive, this, because you have to be in the 12, you have to be in the 7, you have to be in the 4, you have to be in your eye, you have to be, and you have to be in the 7 life processes, and the zodiacal 12, and your 12 senses, and it's all it speaks to a deep continuity that really is blowing me apart at this
Yeah.
time. Like I grasp one thing, and then 5 other things pop up that were
Yeah.
conciliant to that,
Yeah.
right?
I think one of the things that, building on what you're saying there and trying to create like a little bit of focus around one of those areas, one of one of those areas which becomes clear in this lamb moment, which is like in the fifth epoch, which is what we're in, um, is that this is this is where humanity, because you also get a distinct change in the, it's like the nature of the seals. It's like hope is first born here and not by chance, because it's directly connected to Christ, to the Lamb. But what what might be another way of describing this? And any what I'm about to say is something that's like that Christians will readily accept, but it's like it's dressed up like so wonderfully here in Revelation, is this idea that it absolutely straight up, Christ is the savior of the world. This is no exaggeration. We're not dealing in metaphors or analogies. That's it. That's the basic. And it's like from the fifth epoch onwards, humanity has to, it will be forced, every single human being is forced to make a choice. Do I remain in the world of the material, in the world of atoms, and I deny any reality to the spirit world, and I cut myself off from that through my belief? Or Do I so no recognize that the spiritual world is is a reality. It is something that is knowable. It's full of inherent wisdom, and this ability to become conscious of these higher worlds. That is what Christ represents, and you see this bit cuts like clearly this division happening in the fifth seal, or is and we could also we haven't even talked about the letters which are like linked in here as well. And this is the confusion because you've got the letters which is with the epochs, and you've got the seals which is with the cult no with the cultural ages and the epochs. We almost need to redo this, but each and every human being has to take a position on: is there a spiritual world? Is it possible to? It's like, is Christ the way, the truth, and the resurrection, as he says, or is he just like some weirdo that's like had a few ideas? But no, the only reality is what I can see with my eyes and hear with my ears. This is what people are confronted with, and we can like go. We can take this back to this animals thing here, because what begins to get mapped out later in the Revelation is this idea that this turning point in time where we all have to make this decision, those people, it is in Revelation, it's presented as those who believe will receive white robes. Okay. um, but what happens to those that don't? They they actually become more animalistic, so like they lose their humanity, so they regress to these animal forms which they were before. And this is part of what is coming out in Revelation. We've got this we've got this turning point of time, and it's like time in a way is a little bit elastic. He used this picture. It's like in another one of the lectures, which I'll like share. He says, really, as human beings, we should think of like we're a little bit like this mass of rubber, and when a soul spiritual entity that we possess like gets into this rubber, it looks like a human being, but its natural tendency is to go back to it's like the animal archetype which it was part of. It's like we're in our humanity, it's like we're fighting against the natural forces that are inherent in this rubber. So he presents this like it's an elastic band effect. It's like the elastic has been stretched, and some people will, it's like through their own choices, actually liberate themselves from being automatically pinged back into so this animalistic essence, this brutalization of one's own being, and just bringing that like to close to like events where it's like seeing unfolding around the world today. I mean, one way of describing what intense egoism leads to, it's survival of the fittest. It's Animal Farm. That's what it is. And those people that choose Christ are looking for something better than that. Those that aren't, the Revelation is saying it's like the laws are, it's like the future that's coming to us from the astral world is, if you don't make efforts to overcome these natural inbuilt tendencies to, it's like ping back like an elastic band, that's what's going to happen. So it's
Yeah, including if you say to yourself, well, that's just human nature, ubiquitous conditioning that we've visited upon ourselves toward the subhuman as the only reality possible, say.
yeah.
Um, so, how do we do it? is the question. So how do we come into relationship with these formative realities that are part of an evolving existence that we also, in one sense, have a heritage
Yeah.
um, with, in another sense, we'll lose that heritage if we don't find our um, find our souls um, driving the our bodies, so to speak, as opposed to being being driven by our lower drives, right?
Yeah.
And um,
That's
and
the
so
point
this,
you were referring to earlier, wasn't it, with the riders?
yes, and the communities, the seven communities. So the
Mm.
letters to the
Yeah.
communities, that all of the traditions. Well, okay. So at first I want to to touch upon the soul aspect, because in this he says beautifully, those seven communities were represented by um, seven beings, and those beings are the
Yeah.
souls of those communities, and the communities are the body of that being, right? So the community is the body of the being of the soul, that is a spiritual entity that is also ensheathed in a soul, and
Yeah.
the body is the community, to repeat it again. Just as we, our souls, and our souls that then drive our bodies, the soul is the thing that is at stake. And I hate to beat a dead horse here, an apocalyptic horse, one of the horsemen, but this is the reality of the soul is part of the acceptance of what this spiritual responsibility is and what freedom is. And so these are the forces we have to work with. Well, that's very fortunate to me. It's like very clear. Like we have these astral forces that are available to us uh, as potential um, uh, potential modes of perceiving the world and knowing the world in a way that is an experience of the world and what do you say, objectively scientific, say,
Mm.
right? And now you're coming into relationship with being, because you have a soul that is inhabiting that which becomes the very body that you're able to regulate,
Yeah.
say. And that's the meaning, to me, that's one of the meanings of the resurrection, which is why he ends this chapter with the event at Palestine, right? That this is extraordinarily important. uh
Yeah.
God, that's so silly to say, that it is the thing that everything has to be run through. So as Janelle Schickler does in his work, um the metaphysics as Christology, that is a fact. Like
Mm.
the resurrection, uh, we're describing the resurrection, right? And we're also describing the crucifixion. And he also beautifully says Christ is being crucified everywhere right now.
Yeah.
That means us.
Yeah. Just going back to what you were saying about the letters to the churches, because actually it's actually that, as you correctly said, precedes the unsealing of the seals on the book, which is on the altar, which is in the temple. But the the linking to the cultural age is there. There's one group that gets like mentioned a few times, and not the Nicolaitans or Nicolaitanis. It's unsure how to pronounce them, but again, this is in one of these other readings that I was doing is Steiner. If you look in a Bible, they'll say it might have been some obscure sect, but Steiner says no. A Nicolaitan is somebody who represents somebody who refuses to accept. It's like the logos that is going to be coming as to the first church, which is where it gets mentioned. It would be like Vishvakarman was the name for the Christ being for the ancient Indian epoch. So it would be so those people who sort of like decided that Vishvakarman didn't exist. It's just like enough to be where we are. So in any cultural period, anybody who rejects like that's like the next step forward for to humanity, and most importantly, it's like this critical moment when Christ actually is like becomes part of Earth evolution. If there's a rejection of that being, and the moment where it actually became a living force, it's like working within Earth, then that is automatically a a group or an individual who is condemning themselves to not being able to move beyond it's like a material existence on Earth. Um, yeah, so because I think he mentions them in both 5 and 6. So not 100% sure, but he doesn't just mention them once. They get mentioned a few times there, and they're used as a means of expressing this idea. People who are not able to take on. It's like the true impulse of Earth evolution. So
Yeah, I looked into that a little bit, but first I want to say the 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 other thing that's happening with the letters is that it's locating initiation uh, um, centers, 7 initiation centers that are continuous with the initiation centers of the previous times,
hmm.
and looking to bring them all together as 7 into one, so
Yeah,
they become confluent, and so the letters are supposed to be to really meet where they are and move them beyond where they are into a new age that would unify all of them and see the validity of all of them.
yeah,
So one might be working on the etheric body, one might be working on the astral body, one might be working on the sentient soul body, one might be working on the consciousness soul
yeah,
ahead of their time, these sorts of things. The initiation processes that will come help inform how to come out of the mystery centers into the light of day, to take the cult of the midnight sun and bring it into a diurnal relationship, because now all of humanity has to wake up to this initiatory, not even process, but stream. The reality of the initiatory now becomes not only available but necessary for all of humanity. It can't just be somebody coming down from on high, having had an experience on the mountaintop,
yeah,
right, and then coming down and giving the masses what will occur, right. It's the masses are it has to be done within every individual soul, just what we were intimating earlier, and supported here just beautifully.
yeah. Thinking also is so the fifth letter of the church. So the challenges to that church represent it's like our challenges now, and this is again where you find this extreme coherence in it's like everything what we've met. It's like in from Steiner in different areas. Like the next cultural age, it's like that's where humanity so like takes like this huge step forward to like a Christ filled community, which becomes as like a it's like the impulse towards a new civilization. And but that after that, so this idea that so the seventh letter is it's like it's a time of stagnation, and this also maps exactly to what Steiner says is what happens like in this sixth period. It's like this is the time when something new can be born on Earth, and then it's like period number 7 or cultural epoch number 7 is the essential nature of it is it's just sort of like it's bumbling along. There's nothing new. It's like humanity doesn't evolve. It's like it's almost like running out of steam, and it runs into the war of all against all at the end of this period. And if you look at like the few lines that are it's like given to the church at it's Laodicea, isn't it? I think that is the name of the church. You've got this like same flavour of a civilization or humanity itself has run out of steam, and so it's and this helps us link back to so this idea that's like who made it out of the old Atlantis period. It was a small group of uh, people who, as like, were aware of what was going to come. They were part of the Sun Oracle, and that they received this impulse that they would then carry forward into the future, so that after the catastrophe they would form, like, first of all there was like land in Ireland, but then they would form the basis of the civilization in ancient, what we would become ancient India. So he's mapping out that same process there, that it's like civilization will, it's like, come to true fruition. It's like in the cultural period number 6, and then it'll be like just like a mature plant in cultural period number 7 that's not actually capable of creating anything new, and the seeds from 6 will then be carried over into the next round. And yeah, I had never been aware of like the absolute consilience between the images um, in the Apocalypse and Steiner's detailed description of, yeah, what the rest of like this Earth round is going to look like, and it's like the the ages after that, and then the Jupiter Venus, how it's linked in. This is all packed in there. It's like such a vast scope of time that's being encompassed. It's very difficult to get your head around.
So, tell me what you make of this, the 24. Yeah, I don't want to spring this on you, but
Yeah.
that was really intriguing but difficult for me. The 24 that surround the throne, they're the 24 um,
Yeah.
guides.
So uh, it's I did actually, I read something about this, and if you think, we tend to obviously there are 12 signs of the zodiac, but that's not 24. But um, you've got a night and day aspect of those that's happening. So um, it's this idea that you've got a night and day aspect of like these cosmic forces, these divine influences that are all at the seat of the table. So these are the zodiac in their day and their night. It's like, and day and night means, so like, uh, uh, I wanted to say conscious and unconscious, but perhaps I actually mean revealed and unrevealed. Revealed, also like working in the background, it's like hidden in the background there. Um, it's Yeah. So um, that was one of the ideas that I so like I entertained. I don't know. Did you find anything there?
I inklinged my way in to
Mm-hmm.
what it would be as a psycho-spiritual reality, um, as microcosms of this process. And it occurs to me that one way to look at it is the transformation of the senses into spiritual activities, so that you become your that the sense of eye is both, let's say, so the sense of taste is both the uh, that which we know as relates to
Mm-hmm.
being even soul, in a soul sense, discernive, but also that it becomes a spiritualized sense, that the it becomes both the physical sense and the spiritual sense, just as the atmonic uh, moment in the evolution of and development of humanity will be both a physical and spiritual reality. So it is the physical body that's spiritualized, and so the two beings, the ground that is this that is the reflection of the spiritual, becomes more and more spiritualized itself, and the two stand together. And so that it has something to me to do with the the transformation that is both as it is and as it will become.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the duality is held still in a unity,
Yeah. And
something
building
like
on,
that.
yeah, and building on your idea there, and this is also fully conciliant with the idea that Christ isn't like trying to remove us from earth. We want to have a healthy relationship between living firmly planted like on earth, but it's like capable of bringing down or being a conduit for healthy forces for future human evolution. And if you're going to bring down those forces in a conscious fashion, you have to develop the senses for it, and that's what Christ represents in all of spiritual science, and also what I've learned. It's like by doing this deep dive over the last couple of weeks. It's there in the apocalypse. It's like in this hidden imagery, but once you begin to see through it, it's sort of like, God, why when I've read this before have I not been able to see it? But yeah, these things take time to mature. Um, yeah, so it's been a real pleasure being having being forced to read this because it's like our own commitment to the project, but also
Yeah.
it's like doing all the background reading and how it something which just this mysterious, like you couldn't make any sense of it. Now there's a real structure, and this, as you can hear, it's like in my descriptions, there's still some there are still like fuzzy areas of my understanding, but that fuzziness that you can still hear is nothing compared to what it was just 2 weeks now. Now I'm beginning to see it's like these broad strokes, it's like being mapped out, and when I revisit this, I can like begin to like fill in the details so that I don't muck up so like the the letters with the seals and the seals with the trumpets and where the lamb is. Those I'm just like a bit too new in the process to have those really nailed down, but now it feels like I've got a framework which is fully coherent with everything that I know from spiritual science, and that is really uh, that's really something new for me.
Yeah, in fact, it's disarmingly coherent. Like you're finding coherence everywhere, and it's almost confusing. It almost creates the opposite effect in your soul as coherent. Um, uh, God, the thing I was thinking about as well when reading when thinking about the 12 and the 7 and really meditating on
Mm.
those is the 12 points of view, 12 perspectives on the world, and the 7 moods, because the
Yeah.
7 moods have always just hung out there for me. It's like, how do the 7 moods really fit in? But the 7 moods are the 7 churches, in a sense, you could say. They're the 7 spiritual knowings that need to be
Mm.
lit up, that need to be brought into to initiatory fire to light the way, because all 7 can be brought
Yeah.
to bear in a religious kind of way. I use the term religious here, meaning like when he's another part of this is, I believe it's part of this one. I hope it's not part of the dovetail reading I did, but the idea that it is dovetail, but the 7 to the priests this comes from, that the 7 is incredibly important to a community, an instantiated community like an organization,
Mm-hmm.
because you need 7 ways to you got 7 ways to figure things out.
Yeah.
You need 7 ways to embody life. And again, this comes back to the 7 life processes, this mysterious process that's available for every individual, in which the Christ is trying to make available these as spiritual apertures, spiritual knowings, spiritual, but not just knowing like in the intellectual, even the epistemological sense, but in the ontological sense, in the experience.
Yeah. Well, as forces. Yeah. Yeah. So, um, read it. If you got this far in the video, read it and feel yourself transformed. It's like this, the clarity with which like a few aspects of the apocalypse are laid bare. It's a wonderful experience.
Yes, and comment and please help us because obviously
Yeah,
we know
yeah. I'd love it if somebody that really knew this inside out was able to just like have a conversation as well. Just my final comment. One of the things I was also sort of like highly conscious of is when I look at how they try to interpret this in a standard Bible. They've lost this whole idea of it being a revelation of the future for them. So like it's a like, oh well, this is referring to something that happened. So like in the Old Testament, and yeah, 666. This is obviously a reference to Nero. They're placing everything in the past. They are doing the absolute opposite of what it is. It's a It is a description of a past of the past and parts, but they continue talking about the past when John is talking about the future, and seeing where that dividing line goes is with Steiner's help becomes so much easier. It takes work. It certainly takes work, but yeah,
Yeah, finally, I would say that on the other side of that equation are fundamentalist Christian people who are really hanging their hat on the prediction of the future here, and they can see it everywhere. Right? There's the
yeah,
locust. There's the there's the fire. There's the four horsemen. There's like literally, uh, rather than I mean, there are physical uh, correlations through the physical evolution of existence. That's there. But the important of this is the continuity of the timeline is the simultaneity of the way in which there's a fluidity of the future and the past in constant like dialogue and confluence.
yeah,
Right, the mystery of time would be a whole section of a series of dealing with revelations, I would say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Thanks, Jeff. It's been a difficult one, but a good conversation.
A
I'll do the
strange trip.
time honored thing.